Let me ask you something straight from the heart. Have you ever been laughed at, looked down on, or treated like you were nothing? How did it feel? Painful, right? But let me tell you, sometimes those very moments are the fire that shapes us. Trust me, you're stronger than you think. And maybe, just maybe, this story reminded you of that strength. If it touched you even a little, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe so we can keep walking this journey together. Because you and I, we're not alone in this. The restaurant glowed with soft golden lights, the kind meant to flatter expensive jewelry and polished shoes. It was the kind of place where businessmen whispered about mergers and mistresses ordered champagne like it was water. The air smelled of roasted duck, aged wine, and secrets that cost more than rent. Behind all of this glamour, a woman in a black apron moved quietly between tables, balancing heavy trays despite the weight pressing down on her swollen belly. Her name was Elena Miller. She was 28, 6 months pregnant, and working as a waitress in Berlin's most exclusive French restaurant. To the guests, she was invisible. A servant, a shadow, someone to snap at if the bread basket took too long. But Elena carried a story that no one at those tables could imagine. Once, she had been the wife of one of Germany's youngest billionaires, Marcus Adler. He was tall, handsome, and ruthless, a man who could turn stone into gold with his investments and break a heart without blinking. 3 years ago, Elena believed him when he whispered about forever. She had traded her quiet teaching job for his glittering world of mansions, yachts, and galas. She believed she was chosen, loved, protected. But the fairy tale collapsed. When Marcus grew bored, he discarded her like last season's suit. He claimed she wasn't sophisticated enough, not polished enough for the life he wanted. Worse, he humiliated her with his new mistress, Sabrina Vogt, a woman whose beauty was sharp as glass and whose laughter was always too loud. By the time Elena discovered she was pregnant, Marcus was gone, filing for divorce with the speed of a man erasing a mistake. Now she was alone, working double shifts to save money, her hands swollen, her back aching, but her spirit unbroken. That night, fate played its cruelest trick. She was serving a table reserved for VIP guests, a corner booth surrounded by velvet curtains. As she approached with a tray of wine, her heart stopped. Sitting there, dressed in a €1,000 suit, was Marcus. And next to him, her replacement, Sabrina, dripping diamonds, her manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. Elena's chest tightened. She prayed they wouldn't notice her, that she could just pour the wine and slip away. But Marcus glanced up. Recognition flickered in his eyes, then curved into a cruel smile. "Well, well," he said in German, his voice carrying easily over the clatter of dishes. "Look who we have here. The poor little waitress." Sabrina tilted her head, pretending to be surprised, then let out a laugh that made the nearby tables turn. "Is this really your ex-wife, serving tables, while pregnant?" She switched to German as well, assuming Elena couldn't understand every cutting word. "No wonder he left her. She looks like a maid." The words sliced through Elena, but she kept her face calm, eyes down. She set the wine bottle carefully on the table. Her hands trembled, but not from weakness, no, from rage. Marcus leaned closer to Sabrina, speaking loudly enough for Elena to hear. "You know what's funny? She never even learned German properly when we were married. Always struggling with grammar, making mistakes. Now she waits on us. Fitting, isn't it?" The laughter that followed was salt on an open wound. The humiliation stung, not just because of the words, but because the other diners, wealthy, powerful people, were listening. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some smirked, others looked away awkwardly, but no one defended her. Elena's throat tightened. For a moment she thought she might cry. But then something shifted inside her. A fire, long buried under years of pain, sparked alive. She straightened her back. Her hand moved from her belly to the tray, steady and deliberate. Slowly she raised her eyes to Marcus and Sabrina. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. And then, in flawless German, clear, sharp, and unmistakable, she spoke. "Would you like me to explain the wine list to you? Or should I keep it simple, since I wouldn't want either of you to misunderstand?" The table went silent. Marcus froze. Sabrina blinked, her painted lips parting in shock. Around them, nearby diners stopped pretending to ignore the scene. Heads turned, forks paused midair. Elena's voice was calm, But every word carried the weight of her dignity, her intelligence, and the quiet strength she had been forced to hide. "For your information," she continued, still in German, "I am fluent. I always was. Just because I chose patience over arrogance does not mean I was ignorant. But thank you, truly, for reminding everyone here what kind of man you really are." A hush fell across the restaurant. Marcus's smirk faltered, his jaw tightening. Sabrina tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. The glow of superiority they had flaunted moments earlier dimmed under the weight of Alina's steady gaze. The other diners were watching closely now. Some whispered Alina's name. Others lifted their phones, subtly recording. This was more than gossip. It was a scandal unraveling in real time. Alina could feel her heart pounding in her ears, but she didn't look away. For the first time since Marcus abandoned her, she wasn't the broken wife or the pitiful ex. She was a woman standing tall, carrying life inside her and refusing to be shamed. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Because Elena had secrets Marcus never knew. And tonight, in the same language he used to mock her, she was ready to reveal them, one by one. The billionaire thought he could silence her. But he had just given her the stage. The next morning, the city was waking up under a thin drizzle, but inside Elena Miller's small apartment, the day had already begun hours earlier. She sat at the tiny kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea, her swollen feet resting on a low stool. The smell of bread rolls drifted from the bakery downstairs, mingling with the faint sound of traffic through the cracked window. It was a modest place, barely 2 rooms, the walls thin enough to hear the neighbor's television. Yet this little apartment was her sanctuary, her battlefield, and her cradle of hope. Elena touched her belly, feeling a faint kick. A smile tugged at her lips despite the storm of humiliation from the night before. "We'll be fine, little one," she whispered. "Mama won't let anyone crush us." To anyone else, she was just another pregnant waitress trying to survive in Berlin. But her story stretched far beyond the cheap curtains and second-hand furniture. Elena Miller had grown up in Hamburg, the daughter of a modest school teacher and a nurse. She was a bright child, fascinated by languages. By the age of 12, she spoke German and English fluently, and she devoured French novels with the hunger of someone chasing freedom through words. Her dream was to become a translator, to work across cultures, to prove that language could build bridges instead of walls. Life, however, had other plans. Her father died suddenly when she was 17, and her mother struggled to keep the family afloat. College seemed like a distant luxury. Elena studied part-time, taking odd jobs to cover tuition. It was during those long nights waiting tables that she first met Marcus Adler. He was already wealthy then, a rising star in Germany's financial world. His charm was magnetic, his confidence overwhelming. He noticed Elena not as the quiet waitress, but as a rare jewel in a world of glittering glass. Or so she believed. He complimented her eyes, teased her accent in English, told her she deserved more than tips and textbooks. For a girl carrying the weight of survival, his attention felt like salvation. When Marcus proposed after only 8 months, Elena thought it was fate. She left her university courses behind, convinced she would finish later, once life had settled. She became Mrs. Adler, the billionaire's wife. But fairy tales are fragile things. At first, the marriage dazzled her. Lavish galas, ski trips in Switzerland, summers in Monaco. Yet beneath the glitter was a growing shadow. Marcus grew impatient when she stumbled at society dinners, when her dress was too simple, when her laugh wasn't polished enough. He mocked her mistakes in German, pretending it was harmless teasing. Elena tried to learn, tried to mold herself into the wife he wanted. But nothing was enough. Then came Sabrina, beautiful, ruthless, perfectly at home in the billionaire's world. Marcus flaunted her at business events long before the divorce papers arrived. Elena begged, pleaded, but her cries were drowned out by the clicking of cameras and the whispers of society. When she discovered she was pregnant, Marcus didn't soften. He hardened. "You'll only hold me back," he said, cold as steel. "I won't raise a child with a woman who doesn't belong in my world." And so he left. The scandal made headlines for a week, then disappeared, leaving Elena to pick up the shattered pieces of her life. Alone, humiliated, and carrying a child, she moved into the small apartment. She sold the jewelry he had given her, kept only a few clothes, and found work at a restaurant that hired without asking too many questions. The job was grueling. Her belly grew heavier, her back ached, but she refused to quit. She needed money for rent, for baby clothes, for the future. Every tray she carried was a step toward independence. Every coin in her tip jar a promise to her unborn child. And though the nights were lonely, Elena wasn't truly alone. Her closest friend, Marta Klein, a single mother from the restaurant staff, became her anchor. Marta was in her 40s, with a sharp tongue and a heart as wide as the Rhine. She often scolded Elena for working too hard, then slipped extra bread rolls into her bag for the journey home. "You're stronger than you think," Marta would say, wiping sweat from her brow after a long shift. "Men like Marcus, they only look powerful. Real power is surviving what they leave behind." Elena held on to those words like lifelines. But there was something else she held on to, something she had never told Marcus: her fluency in languages. While he mocked her, she had studied in secret. She spoke German, English, French, and Spanish with ease. She had always been fluent, but she hid it, playing the role of the quiet, submissive wife to avoid conflict. Now, her silence was gone. The night at the restaurant had changed everything. Standing before Marcus and Sabrina, speaking in flawless German, had reminded her of the woman she used to be, the girl who dreamed of conquering the world with words. And if Marcus thought she would remain silent, he was about to learn otherwise. As Elena placed her mug on the table, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Marta. "They're back tonight. Same table. You working?" Elena's chest tightened. Marcus and Sabrina, again? Was fate testing her or offering her a chance? She rose slowly, her hand on her belly. The baby kicked again, as if answering. She exhaled, steady and firm. "Yes," she typed back. "I'm working. And this time, I won't just serve them. I'll show them who I really am." The woman Marcus thought he had destroyed was about to rise, and she would not rise quietly. Berlin was a city of contradictions. Ancient stone cathedrals standing beside glittering glass towers, quiet cobblestone streets giving way to neon-lit clubs. For Elena, this city was no longer a backdrop of romance, but a stage for survival. She worked in Le Jardin Étoilé, one of the most prestigious French restaurants in the capital. To the public, it was a jewel of sophistication, known for truffle risotto, chandeliers imported from Paris, and a wine list that read like a billionaire's diary. To Elena, it was a battlefield where she fought exhaustion, judgmental stares, and the weight of her unborn child. Every evening, luxury cars pulled up to the entrance, spilling out politicians, celebrities, and businessmen whose names shaped stock markets. Paparazzi lingered outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of someone important. Inside, the air was thick with perfume and power. Waiters moved like shadows, trained to be invisible, while guests sipped champagne worth more than a month's rent. This was the place Marcus Adler loved. He thrived here, among glittering chandeliers and hushed conversations, because the restaurant mirrored his soul, polished on the outside, ruthless underneath. For Elena, the irony was cruel. Once she had dined at these very tables, Marcus's hand on hers, believing she belonged. Now she carried trays past people who pretended not to see her, as though she were part of the furniture. The humiliation was sharp, but she endured it, because every paycheck was another brick in the foundation of her child's future. The staff knew her story in fragments. Some whispered that she had once been wealthy, others that she was simply unlucky. Marta knew the truth. She often scolded Elena for keeping the job despite her pregnancy, but Elena refused to leave. "Every coin matters," she said. "Every hour I work is one less hour Marcus owns me." The restaurant was not only her workplace, it was also where her past and future collided. The very first time Marcus and Sabrina walked in together, Elena nearly dropped a tray. She felt the stares, the pity, the smirks. Marcus had looked through her like she was a stranger, his arm draped over Sabrina's shoulders as if he had upgraded to something better. But that night, when she answered them in fluent German, the balance shifted. For the first time, Marcus looked unsettled. For the first time, the mistress's laugh faltered. And fate, it seemed, wasn't finished, because Marcus and Sabrina kept coming back. It was deliberate, Elena realized. They could have chosen any restaurant in Berlin, but they returned to Le Jardin Étoilé, always requesting the same table, always flaunting their romance in front of her. It was a game to them, a way to remind Elena that they had won, that she was nothing more than a waitress carrying a child alone. The humiliation burned, but Elena also sensed something else. Each visit exposed them, stripped away the illusion of perfection they tried to project. Their words grew louder, their arrogance more obvious, and the other guests were beginning to notice. Phones were raised, videos circulated, whispers spread, and Elena knew the truth. Marcus Adler's empire was built not just on money, but on image. If that image cracked, his empire would shake. Outside of the restaurant, Berlin was not kind. Elena's neighborhood was filled with peeling paint and broken sidewalks, a world away from Marcus's glass towers. She lived carefully, budgeting every euro, sewing old clothes, avoiding unnecessary expenses. At night, she lay awake, listening to her baby's heartbeat through the small monitor she had saved up to buy. That sound was her anchor. Her only luxury was the small stack of books beside her bed. Dictionaries, novels in different languages, and journals where she scribbled translations late into the night. Words were her weapon, her secret strength, the part of her Marcus never understood. And yet, despite her resolve, the fear was real. She worried about the future. Would she be able to provide enough? Would her child grow up asking about a father who chose wealth over family? Would society forever see her as the discarded wife? These questions haunted her. But every time she felt her baby kick, she found her answer. She would endure. She would fight. And she would never allow Marcus's cruelty to define her child's life. Still, she wasn't blind to the danger. Marcus was powerful, and men like him did not tolerate humiliation. If he felt threatened, he would strike back. And Sabrina, vain, ambitious, calculating, would gladly help him. The restaurant became a chessboard, each night a new move. Elena stayed professional, but she chose her words carefully, each one a subtle strike. Sometimes she let Marcus believe he had cornered her, only to disarm him with a calm, cutting remark. Guests noticed, some sympathized, others gossiped. Slowly, Elena realized she had an audience, and an audience was power. One Friday evening, as the rain lashed against the restaurant windows, Marta leaned close to Elena during a break. "You know what they're saying in the back?" she whispered. "What?" Elena asked. "That you're braver than all of them, that you're not just a waitress. You're a story. People are watching you, Elena. They're rooting for you." Elena blinked, her throat tightening. She had spent so long believing she was invisible, powerless. But Marta's words planted a seed. If people were watching, maybe it was time to let them see who she really was. Later that night, Marcus and Sabrina arrived again, laughing loudly as though the world belonged to them. Marcus caught Elena's eye and smirked. "Still here?" he asked in German, his tone mocking. Elena placed the menus on the table, her voice calm but firm. "Yes, and unlike you, I'm not afraid to work for what I have." Nearby diners glanced up, phones tilted discreetly. Marcus's smirk stiffened. Sabrina shifted uncomfortably, sensing the weight of the stares. Elena turned away, her tray balanced perfectly, her back straight. Her hands trembled slightly, but not with fear. No, this was something else. This was resolve. Because for the first time she understood, she wasn't just surviving, she was building something larger. The restaurant was no longer her prison, it was her stage. And soon she would use it to destroy the man who once destroyed her. Marcus Adler had always been a man who thrived on power. In Berlin's financial world, his name carried weight like a thunderstorm. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and made others shrink without saying a word. To his admirers, he was brilliant, decisive, untouchable. To those who knew him intimately, he was cold, arrogant, and cruel. On paper, Marcus was the dream of every magazine cover. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair swept neatly back, his jaw as sharp as the suits he wore. But beneath that polished exterior was a man who measured people in currency. Love was leverage, loyalty was a tool, and relationships were investments. When he first met Elena, he had admired her innocence. She was soft-spoken, humble, and unlike the glittering women who usually chased him. At first, she was refreshing, but Marcus was a man who craved novelty the way others craved air. The quiet love Elena gave soon felt dull to him. He wanted fire, glamour, and danger. That was when Sabrina Vogt entered his life. Sabrina was everything Elena was not, at least in Marcus's shallow eyes. She was bold, sharp, and hungry for the spotlight. At 26, she had clawed her way into Berlin's social circles, using beauty like a weapon and charm like a scalpel. Her laughter filled rooms, her fashion turned heads, and her ambition made her dangerous. She had been a junior PR consultant when Marcus first noticed her at a gala. While Elena sat quietly by his side, Sabrina dazzled the room in a red silk gown, her every move calculated to capture attention. Marcus was drawn instantly, not to her soul, but to what she represented: status, vanity, a mirror to his own hunger for dominance. Their affair began in whispers and ended in headlines. Marcus did not care about discretion. In fact, he seemed to enjoy the scandal. He flaunted Sabrina openly, taking her to events, parading her like a trophy. When Elena wept, he dismissed her tears as weakness. When she begged him to think of their marriage, he laughed and told her she was lucky he had tolerated her for so long. To Marcus, Elena was an old chapter. Sabrina was the new story he wanted to write. But Sabrina was not simply a mistress. She was a strategist. She knew Marcus's weaknesses, his ego, his obsession with image, and she used them. Where Elena offered love, Sabrina offered performance. Where Elena gave patience, Sabrina gave manipulation. She fed his arrogance, told him he deserved more, whispered that Elena was dragging him down. And Marcus believed it. Now, months after the divorce, Marcus and Sabrina lived like royalty. They were inseparable, appearing at every high-profile restaurant, every gala, every interview. Sabrina wore diamonds Marcus had once promised Elena. She sat in the cars Elena once rode in, slept in the penthouse Elena once called home. And every time they saw Elena at Le Jardin Étoilé, their cruelty deepened. To them, humiliating her wasn't accidental. It was entertainment. "Look at her," Sabrina would whisper in German, her voice dripping with scorn. "Pregnant, serving food, pathetic." And Marcus would smirk, enjoying the performance. "It's fitting. She was never meant for my world. Now she belongs exactly where she should be, at our table, not beside it." What neither of them realized was that their arrogance was planting seeds of destruction. Their words were not confined to whispers anymore. Other guests were beginning to listen. Their mockery was being recorded. The image they so carefully curated, the perfect power couple, was unraveling thread by thread. Yet Marcus was too blind to see it. He believed his money and influence shielded him from consequences. If anyone dared challenge him, he had lawyers, connections, and intimidation at his disposal. And Sabrina? She believed as long as she sparkled, the world would forgive her cruelty. But cracks were forming. Behind closed doors, Marcus and Sabrina's relationship was not as golden as it seemed. Marcus was demanding, jealous, and controlling. He reminded Sabrina often that without him, she was nothing. Sabrina, in turn, resented his dominance. She craved the wealth, the lifestyle, but she also longed for independence, for recognition beyond being Marcus Adler's mistress. Their love was not love. It was a war disguised as passion. Still, in public they performed flawlessly. They laughed louder than anyone, kissed dramatically for the cameras, ordered the most expensive dishes, and mocked Elena without mercy. To them, Elena was a symbol of weakness, a reminder of a past they believed they had erased. But arrogance blinds. Marcus did not know Elena's secret, that she was fluent in every word they used to degrade her. He did not know she had built quiet strength in his absence. He did not know she was learning how to turn humiliation into power. Sabrina, too, underestimated her. She saw Elena as a shadow, a servant, a nobody. In her mind, Elena had been defeated the moment Marcus signed the divorce papers. She did not see the fire burning in Elena's eyes, the silent promise that the story was far from over. And then came the night that shifted everything. It was a Saturday, the restaurant buzzing with the weekend crowd. Marcus and Sabrina entered as usual, Sabrina's dress shimmering under the chandeliers, Marcus's presence commanding the room. Elena approached their table with calm precision, her apron tied neatly, her tray steady. Marcus leaned back, smirking. "Still here, Elena? You must enjoy serving us." Sabrina laughed, adding in German, "Maybe she hopes you'll take her back." Poor thing doesn't realize she was replaced by something better. Nearby diners stiffened. Some looked disgusted, others curious. A phone camera tilted discreetly. The air thickened, waiting for Elena's response. Elena inhaled slowly, her hand brushing her belly. She met Marcus's eyes, then Sabrina's. And in flawless German, her voice calm but razor-sharp, she said, "Better? I don't think so. Diamonds don't shine when they're soaked in cruelty. And as for you, Marcus, I was never beneath you. I was simply too good for you to see." The words sliced through the air. Gasps rippled across the restaurant. Marcus's smirk collapsed into a scowl. Sabrina's painted lips tightened, her face pale beneath the glow of her makeup. Phones captured every second. And Alina, steady and unshaken, placed the menus gently on the table before walking away. For the first time, Marcus and Sabrina realized they weren't mocking a weak woman. They were provoking a storm. The restaurant was busier than usual that night. A famous opera singer had chosen Le Jardin Étoilé for her after-performance dinner, and the place buzzed with reporters, photographers, and half the city's elite. The chandeliers glittered brighter, the wine flowed faster, and conversations rose like a tide. Elena felt the tension the moment she stepped onto the floor. She could handle crowded nights. She had learned to carry trays through chaos without spilling a drop. But this was different. The air was charged, like the city before a summer storm. And then she saw them. Marcus and Sabrina, sliding into their usual corner booth like royalty claiming a throne. Sabrina wore a gown the color of emeralds, clinging to her body like a second skin. Diamonds dripped from her neck, glittering every time she laughed. Marcus sat with the casual arrogance of a man who believed the room belonged to him. They weren't alone tonight. At their table sat 3 foreign investors, powerful men from Zurich, Milan, and London. Elena had overheard the Matrid whisper their names with reverence. These were men whose decisions could shift millions, even billions, in Marcus's world. Tonight was important for him. His reputation, his empire, his pride, all of it balanced on their approval. Elena steadied herself, tray in hand. She had almost reached their table when Marcus's voice cut through the noise, loud and deliberate. "Gentlemen," he said in German, gesturing toward Elena, "let me show you something amusing." The investors looked up, curious. Sabrina smirked, already sensing his game. "This," Marcus continued, "is my ex-wife. Once she dined with me at tables like yours, now she carries plates to ours. Life has a sense of humor, doesn't it?" The table erupted in laughter. Sabrina leaned forward, adding fuel. "And she's pregnant too. I suppose waitressing is the only skill she has left." Their laughter rang out across the restaurant, sharp and cruel. Guests turned, whispers rippling through the crowd. Cameras shifted. Elena felt the burn of humiliation rise like fire in her throat. Her cheeks flushed, her chest tightened, but she refused to look away. She set the tray down calmly, her hands steady though her heart thundered. For a moment, silence pressed against her, urging her to bow, to walk away, to swallow the shame. But something inside her snapped. For months, she had endured their mockery. For months, she had carried the weight of their cruelty in silence. But tonight was different. Tonight, Marcus had chosen to humiliate her, not just in front of strangers, but in front of the very men whose approval he needed most. And Elena was done being silent. She straightened her back, her hand resting protectively on her belly. She looked Marcus directly in the eye and spoke, in flawless German, her voice clear and strong enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "You want to show them something amusing?" she asked. "Then let me oblige." The investors leaned forward, intrigued. The restaurant hushed, the clinking of cutlery fading into silence. "Gentlemen," Elena continued, turning her gaze toward them, "what Marcus forgot to tell you is that while I was his wife, I wasn't just a decoration. I was the one who translated his contracts in English, French, and Spanish. I was the one who prepared his speeches so he wouldn't embarrass himself at international conferences. I was the one who stood behind his success when he could barely stand himself." Gasps rippled through the room. Marcus's smirk faltered. Sabrina's face paled. Elena's voice grew sharper, cutting like glass. "He mocked me for not knowing German, when in truth, I let him believe that because it made his ego feel safe. But I am fluent, not just in German but in 5 languages. And unlike Marcus, I know how to use words to build, not to destroy." A stunned silence followed. One of the investors, the man from Zurich, tilted his head. "Is this true?" he asked Marcus in German, his tone cautious. Marcus stammered, his mask of confidence cracking. She exaggerates. She's bitter, angry." But Elena cut him off. "Bitter? No. Angry? Perhaps. But mostly free. Free from the chains of a man who values women only as trophies. Free from the cruelty that hides behind a smile." The investors exchanged uneasy glances. The Londoner muttered something under his breath, unimpressed. The Milanese shook his head. The balance in the room had shifted. Power was no longer at Marcus's table. It was standing above it, dressed in a waitress's uniform, carrying a child he had abandoned. Sabrina tried to laugh it off. "She's desperate," she said loudly. "She's making a scene." But no one laughed with her. Elena's voice softened, but it carried the weight of truth. "Yes, I am pregnant. And unlike Marcus, who discards responsibility when it's inconvenient, I see this child as my strength. This little life inside me gives me more dignity than all his billions ever could." The restaurant erupted in murmurs. Some guests clapped quietly, others nodded in approval. Phones were raised higher, recording every word, every look. Marcus's face darkened, rage boiling beneath his skin. He leaned forward, his voice a hiss. "You'll regret this, Elena. You have no idea who you're humiliating." Elena met his glare without flinching. "No, Marcus, for the first time, the world is seeing exactly who you are." The investors rose from the table, their expressions stiff. Without a word, they walked toward the door, their departure echoing louder than any applause. Marcus jumped to his feet, panic flashing across his face. "Wait, this isn't what it looks like." But they didn't wait. They were gone. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Sabrina's bracelets clinking as she nervously adjusted her hair. Marcus stood frozen, his empire trembling with the weight of one waitress's words. And Elena? She turned calmly, lifting her tray once more. Her back was straight, her step steady. She did not need to stay for the aftermath. She had already won the night. But as she disappeared into the kitchen, her heart pounded with something more than triumph. Because she knew Marcus Adler was not a man who would accept defeat. He would strike back. And when he did, it wouldn't just be in a restaurant, it would be war. And Elena was ready for war. The applause from the restaurant still echoed in Elena's ears as she left her shift that night, but by the time she stepped onto the quiet, rain-slick streets of Berlin, the sound had turned into a heavy silence. The adrenaline was gone, and with it came the weight of what she had done. Her words had been bold, sharp, and true, but Marcus was not the kind of man who accepted humiliation. He was powerful, ruthless, and vindictive. By exposing him in public, she had lit a fire, and she knew he would come for her. Her apartment felt smaller than ever when she arrived home. She closed the door, leaned against it, and let the tray of emotions spill out of her chest. Tears ran hot down her face, not from regret, but from fear. Fear for her child. Fear for the storm she had just unleashed. She sank into the old couch, cradling her belly. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered. "Maybe I was foolish. Maybe I shouldn't have spoken." Her voice cracked. "What if he takes everything from us? What if he takes you?" The baby kicked softly, as if answering her, and she pressed her palm against the movement. The tiny rhythm anchored her, but it couldn't erase the dread building inside. The next morning, her fears began to take form. A letter slipped under her door. No name, no address, only one line written in Marcus's bold handwriting. "Enjoy your moment, Elena. It will be your last." Her stomach clenched. She folded the letter, shoved it into a drawer, and tried to breathe. But the message haunted her all day at the restaurant. Every shadow felt like a threat, every unfamiliar customer a spy. By the third day, whispers spread among the staff. "Did you hear? Marcus Adler lost those investors," one waiter murmured. "They walked out of the deal. Millions gone." Another added, "He blames her, the waitress, his ex." Eyes flicked toward Elena, pity, fear, admiration. Elena tried to stay strong, but the pressure was suffocating. Her hands shook as she carried trays. Her back ached from the pregnancy. Her heart raced at every unexpected sound. At night, she lay awake, imagining Marcus storming into her apartment, lawyers pounding on her door, Sabrina smirking at her downfall. Her body felt heavy, not just from the child she carried, but from the burden of standing alone against a man who had everything. One night, Marta found her sitting on a bench outside the restaurant, her face pale, her hands trembling. "You look like you're about to faint," Marta said firmly, sitting beside her. "You need rest." Elena shook her head. "I can't rest. He's going to destroy me. He has money, lawyers, power. What do I have?" Marta placed a strong hand over hers. "You have truth, you have courage, and you're not alone." But Elena didn't believe it. Not yet. That evening, her fears seemed to come true. A black car pulled up outside the restaurant just as she finished her shift. Two men in dark suits stepped out. Their eyes scanned the street before settling on her. Her pulse spiked. She froze, clutching her bag. The men approached, their faces blank. "Mrs. Miller," one said coldly, "Mr. Adler requests a meeting. Now." Elena shook her head, backing away. "No, tell him I have nothing to say." The man's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice." Marta burst through the doors then, her voice sharp. "She's pregnant. She's not going anywhere with you." For a moment, tension thickened. Then the men exchanged a glance, turned and walked back to the car. It pulled away silently, leaving only the echo of its threat. Elena collapsed into Marta's arms, sobbing. "He won't stop. He'll never stop." Marta held her tightly. "Then we won't stop either. But listen to me. You can't fight him if you break yourself first. You need to rest. For you. For the baby." For the first time, Elena admitted the truth out loud. "I'm scared, Marta. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Marta's eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. "Strength isn't about not being scared. It's about standing anyway. But if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your child." That night, back in her apartment, Elena curled on the couch, exhaustion pressing down like iron. She felt trapped between two worlds, the fragile safety of her small home and the looming shadow of Marcus's power. Her phone buzzed. A message. She hesitated before opening it. It was a photo. A picture of her apartment building, taken from the street below. The caption read, "You can't hide." Her blood turned cold. She rushed to the window, yanking the curtain aside. The street looked empty, but the fear was already inside her chest, choking her. She stumbled back, gripping her belly. Tears blurred her vision. "God, please," she whispered, "protect us." That night, she didn't sleep. Every creak of the building, every car passing outside, every shadow felt like Marcus's reach closing in. She wrapped her arms around her belly, rocking back and forth, whispering to the baby, "I'll keep you safe. I swear. I'll find a way." But inside, doubt screamed louder. Could she really fight him? Could one woman, pregnant and alone, stand against a billionaire who controlled courts, contracts, and crowds? By dawn, her eyes were swollen, her spirit cracked. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Hollow cheeks, trembling hands, eyes red from crying. She felt weak, broken, and utterly lost. For the first time since Marcus left her, she truly doubted herself. And that doubt was dangerous, because Marcus wasn't just threatening her. He was watching, waiting for her to collapse completely. And if Elena didn't find her strength soon, Marcus Adler would take everything from her, including the child she carried. Elena woke up after a sleepless night, her face swollen from tears, her body aching with fear and exhaustion. For hours, she had clutched her belly, whispering promises to her unborn child. But fear still clung to her like a second skin. Yet when the morning light spilled through the thin curtains, something inside her shifted. She realized Marcus wanted her to stay exactly where she was. Afraid, trembling, paralyzed. That was his power, control through intimidation. But she was tired of being afraid. She walked to the drawer where she had shoved Marcus's threatening letter. She pulled it out, stared at the sharp handwriting, then tore it into pieces. Her hands stopped trembling. Her eyes hardened. If Marcus wanted war, he would get one. What Marcus never understood, what he never cared to learn, was that Elena was more than the quiet wife he discarded. She had skills, intelligence, and allies he didn't expect. And now, for the first time, she was ready to use them. The first ally was herself. Back in the days of their marriage, when Marcus mocked her for not being fluent in German, Elena had been studying. Quietly, secretly, she had mastered not just German, but English, French, Spanish, and Italian. She had translated documents, contracts, and international deals that Marcus's lawyers had struggled with. She had taken notes in meetings, correcting mistakes no one else noticed. Marcus never gave her credit. He never realized his empire had leaned on her knowledge more than once. He assumed she was silent because she was simple, but her silence was a choice. Now, silence was no longer an option. The second ally was unexpected. Marta, her loyal friend, had seen her collapse and refused to let her stay broken. The very next day, Marta arrived at Elena's apartment carrying a heavy briefcase. "I didn't know if you'd be ready," Marta said, setting it down. "But I'm not letting you fight him alone." Elena frowned. "What is this?" Marta opened the briefcase. Inside were files, receipts, and papers thick with notes. "I worked at Adler Corporation years ago before I came to the restaurant," Marta explained. Back then, Marcus was already bending the rules. Offshore accounts, false reports, tax tricks. I kept copies, just in case. I didn't know why, maybe instinct. But now I do. Elena's breath caught. You mean, we have proof? Proof, Marta said firmly, that Marcus Adler isn't the flawless billionaire he pretends to be. Proof that could ruin him if it ever went public. Elena touched the papers with trembling hands. She felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. The third ally came in the form of technology. The viral age was cruel, but it was also powerful. Videos of her confrontation at the restaurant had spread online, faster than Marcus could control. Strangers on social media were calling her the brave waitress, the pregnant ex-wife who stood up to a billionaire. People admired her courage. Elena realized she had something Marcus could never buy: public sympathy. Power was no longer one-sided. That night, Elena sat at her small table with Marta's briefcase open, her laptop glowing, her child kicking gently inside her. She pieced everything together: Marcus's threats, the public humiliation, the videos online, and now, the files Marta had kept. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a woman with knowledge, allies, and a stage. Her plan began to take shape. Step 1. Protect herself legally. She contacted a women's rights lawyer, showing her the threatening letter, the messages, the files Marta had saved. The lawyer, impressed by Elena's calm determination, agreed to help. Men like him think they're untouchable, she said. But the law doesn't bend forever. Step 2. Prepare her voice. Elena drafted a statement in every language she knew, carefully choosing her words. If Marcus wanted to ruin her publicly, she would answer publicly, but smarter, louder, stronger. Step 3. Confront him one final time, not as the frightened ex-wife, but as a woman armed with truth. For days, Elena worked tirelessly, her body exhausted but her spirit reignited. She still feared Marcus, but now the fear burned into fuel. Every time she felt her child move, she remembered why she was fighting. She wasn't doing this only for herself. She was doing it to build a safe world for her baby, a world where Marcus's shadow could no longer reach them. And fate delivered the perfect opportunity. A week later, Marcus hosted a charity gala at the Grand Berlin Hotel, a spectacle covered by every major news outlet. It was meant to restore his image after losing investors, to prove that Marcus Adler was still untouchable. Politicians, celebrities, and journalists filled the ballroom, champagne flowing as orchestras played. Cameras flashed. Sabrina sparkled on his arm, desperate to keep their illusion alive. Elena arrived quietly, not as a guest, but as part of the staff. Her apron was crisp, her hair tied neatly, her tray balanced perfectly. But inside her pocket was something far heavier than wine glasses. The USB drive loaded with Marta's evidence, ready to expose Marcus for what he truly was. As she walked through the glittering ballroom, her heart pounded. Marcus hadn't noticed her yet. Sabrina was too busy laughing for the cameras. But Elena knew the moment was coming. The moment when their eyes would meet, and the balance of power would shift forever. She took a slow breath, hand brushing her belly. "We're ready," she whispered to her child. And then it happened. Marcus turned, his gaze sweeping the room, and froze when he saw her. His confident smile faltered. For the first time in his life, Marcus Adler looked afraid. Because Elena Miller was no longer the silent woman he mocked. She was the storm he had created. And tonight, in front of the entire city, she was ready to strike. The Grand Berlin Hotel glittered like a palace. Crystal lights spilled over gold railings, and cameras flashed in hungry bursts as politicians, CEOs, and journalists swept through the revolving doors. Tonight's gala was Marcus Adler's grand attempt to polish his name. He shook hands, he laughed loudly. He squeezed Sabrina's jeweled fingers and posed like a king reclaiming his crown. Elena slipped through a service hallway with a silver tray and a steady breath. Her uniform was pressed, but beneath the apron she wore a simple black dress that fit like armor. In her pocket, the USB drive felt heavier than stone. Marta squeezed her arm before she stepped into the ballroom. "I'm here," Marta whispered. "Your lawyer is here too. Whatever happens, we hold the line." Elena nodded. Her heart beat a fierce rhythm against her ribs. She had been mocked, threatened, and frightened to the edge of collapse. But fear had burned into something cleaner. It had become purpose. A string quartet softened as the MC called for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "Mr. Adler will deliver his address." Marcus strode onto the stage, handsome and glossy, the room curving toward him like a bow. Berlin, he began, is a city of resilience. I too have faced recent challenges, but tonight is about generosity, about... The screen behind him flickered. A hush fell. On the mammoth LED wall, a document appeared, an offshore registry form with Adler Holdings stamped in the corner. Another document followed, a wire transfer to a consulting shell linked to a PR firm Sabrina supposedly freelanced for. A third slid over the second, a falsified ESG impact report bearing Marcus's signature block. Murmurs swelled like wind. Marcus froze. "Turn that off," he snapped. It did not turn off. A new slide, quarterly emails in English and Italian about shifting profits to a Maltese account. Then French notes summarizing investor calls. At the bottom, neat blue annotations corrected grammar, fact checks, and translation errors, notes that had kept those deals alive. The username on the notes, E. Muller. People turned. Cameras found her. Elena walked from the side aisle, no longer hiding. She approached the stage without rushing, eyes clear, hand on her child. The MC hesitated, then extended the microphone. Elena took it with quiet hands. "Good evening," she said in German, steady and crisp. "I was told I didn't belong in Marcus's world, that I couldn't understand German, that I was simple. But I understood everything. In German, in English, in French, in Spanish, in Italian. I understood the language of numbers too, the ones that don't match." The room held its breath. Elena continued, switching to English for the international press. "These files are copies maintained by a former employee and preserved legally. They show how image was polished while truth was buried. They show money routed where charity should have flowed. They show a billionaire who mocked a pregnant woman for working while she quietly did the work he took credit for." Marcus lunged for the mic. Security stepped between them at the hotel manager's silent nod. Sabrina moved to the edge of the stage, lips tight, eyes darting at the journalists who now surged forward. Elena turned to Sabrina, calm as winter. "You mocked me, in German, at my lowest point. Tonight I'll answer in a language you prefer. Attention." She angled toward the cameras. Sabrina Vogt accepted payments through a shell that pitched hostile narratives about women who spoke against Adler Holdings. I won't repeat her words here. The documents speak louder. Sabrina's laugh cracked. "She's lying. She's jealous." A reporter called out, "Miss Miller, did you plan this to ruin Mr. Adler's charity event?" "I planned this," Elena said, "to stop a man from ruining other people's lives, including my child's." Her lawyer stepped forward, crisp and composed, a packet in hand. "For the record," the lawyer announced, "we filed for a protective order this afternoon. We are also submitting evidence to the Financial Crimes Unit in the morning. Service of process is being effected now." A court officer approached the stage and placed sealed documents into Marcus's hand. The cameras flashed like lightning. Marcus stared at the papers, then at Elena, and something broke behind his eyes. The MC, pale but professional, tried to rescue the evening. "Perhaps we should pause the program." Elena lifted the mic one final time, voice soft but carrying. "To every woman who's been laughed at in a language people assumed she didn't understand, learn it, master it, then use it. Not to humiliate, but to tell the truth in a way that cannot be ignored." Applause started in pockets and then swelled. Not everyone clapped. Some looked away, careful and calculating. But survivors in evening gowns and dishwashers and rolled sleeves clapped hardest. Security guided Marcus and Sabrina off stage as questions hammered the air. The screen faded to the gala banner, but the damage was done. The story had already left the room in 1,000 recordings and 100 headlines forming at once. Back in the service corridor, Elena leaned against the cool tile and finally exhaled. Marta arrived first, pressing a bottle of water into her hand, then pulling her into a fierce hug. "You did it, girl," Marta said, tears bright. "You walked through fire and didn't burn." Elena laughed and sobbed at the same time, shoulders shaking with relief. The lawyer joined them, voice calm. "An injunction is likely by Monday. We'll seek interim support, full medical coverage, and a structured visitation schedule on your terms. He won't be able to approach you." "What about the files?" Elena asked. "They go to regulators at dawn," the lawyer said. "Let the system do its work." It did. In the days that followed, headlines multiplied. 2 board members resigned, a government inquiry opened. The Zurich investor publicly suspended talks, citing ethical concerns. Sabrina disappeared from social media, her sponsorship deals evaporated. Marcus tried a counterattack, but the videos from the restaurant and the documents from the gala drowned his spin. He gave one brittle interview, then none at all. Elena used the quiet to build a life. A local foundation offered her a position to lead a new language access program for immigrant mothers, navigating hospitals and schools. She accepted with a steady heart and a monthly paycheck that felt like respect. A small translation studio asked her to consult. She taught a free evening class in German for women who wanted a voice at their jobs. She bought a second-hand crib and painted it a soft sky blue. When labor came, it was long, honest, and full of light. Marta was there, whispering jokes between contractions, and the nurse smiled every time Elena translated medical phrases for herself before the staff could. Her son arrived with a fierce cry, "Pink and perfect?" She named him Leo. In the hospital's dim quiet, Elena pressed her cheek to his hair and whispered, "We made it." Leo's tiny fingers curled around hers like a promise. Marta wiped her face and declared herself godmother on the spot. 2 weeks later, Elena wheeled Leo into Le Jardin Étoilé at closing time. The staff had baked a lopsided cake and stuck a single candle in the center. The chef set down his knife and cried openly. The dishwasher lifted Leo like a prince and kissed his forehead. They sang in 3 languages. Elena laughed until she cried again, the good kind of tears. Outside, spring softened Berlin's hard edges. The city felt new, not because it changed, but because she had. She stopped walking with her head down. She looked people in the eyes and spoke the language that moved them, whichever one that was. German at the clinic, English with a banker, Spanish to a shy teenager at the bus stop. One evening, as the sun spilled across the kitchen table, her phone buzzed. A message from the Zurich investor. "If you're open, I could use your guidance on ethics and language in international deals." Elena smiled, not because she needed him, but because choice felt like air. She recorded a short video in her tiny living room for the women who had written to her. No fancy lights, no makeup, just a mother and her child. "You don't need €1 billion, she said. "You need one truth said clearly, again and again, in the language people use to hide from it." She kissed Leo's head and added, "And if they laugh in German, answer in German. If they whisper in English, answer in English. If they mock you at work, answer with your work. Dignity is fluent." That night, before sleep, Elena opened the window and listened to the city. Somewhere, the Grand Berlin's chandeliers still glowed, and people still posed for cameras. Let them. She had a crib, a stack of baby blankets, and a future that didn't require permission. She turned off the lamp, lay down beside Leo's crib, and smiled into the dark. When the cameras flashed one last time, everyone finally knew. The pregnant waitress had rewritten the ending, and her new beginning had only just begun. All right, my friend, so that's how this story comes to an end. And if you're still here with me right now, it means something deep in it touched your heart. Life will throw betrayal, pain, and humiliation at us, but as Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Healing starts when we claim that power. So let's carry this lesson into our own lives. Dignity, strength, and self-respect always shine brighter than cruelty. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe, because together we'll keep reminding each other that no storm lasts forever, and every ending can be a new beginning.